Hello, my dear. Today with me, a mysterious woman. No time to spare. Thinking about what matters by Ursula Le Guin. Ursula Kroeber Le Guin was a celebrated author whose body of work includes 23 novels, 12 volumes of short stories, 11 volumes of poetry, 13 children's books, 5 essay collections, and 4 works of translation. The Imagination earned her 6 Nebula Awards, 7 Hugo Awards, and many others. Ursula Kroeber was born in 1929 and grew up in Berkeley, California. Her parents were anthropologists, Alfred Kroeber and writer Theodora Kroeber, author of Ishi. She attended Radcliffe College and did graduate work at Columbia University. She married historian Charles Le Guin in Paris in 1953. They lived in Portland, Oregon, beginning in 1958 and had 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Le Guin died peacefully in her home in January 2018. Today, no time to spare, thinking about what matters. But before that, something important for writers. The Ursula Le Guin Prize for Fiction is an annual $25,000 cash prize given to a writer for a single work of imaginative fiction. Nominations for the prize are open from February to April 2022. The prize will be given to a writer whose work reflects the concepts and ideas that were central to Ursula's own work, including, but not limited to, hope, equity and freedom, non-violence and alternatives to conflict, and a holistic view of humanity's place in the natural world. And you know what? She was a blogger too. In 2010, at the age of 81, Ursula started a blog. A subset of these writings were collected in No Time to Spare, released in December 2017. I want to share with you a few thought-provoking ideas. And you know what? It will be a new experiment for me, because usually I try to practice a lot my correct pronunciation. But today, it will be the naked truth about my currently pronunciation, and it will be naked truth about our world by Ursula Le Guin. In your spare time, when all the time you have is spare, is free, what do you make of it? And what's the difference, really, between that and the time you used to have when you were 50 or 30 or 15? Kids used to have a whole lot of spare time, middle class kids anyhow, outside of school, and if they weren't into a sport, most of their time was spare, and they figured out more or less successfully what to do with it. I had whole spare summers when I was a teenager, 3 spare months. I read, I wrote, I hang out with friends, thoughts and feelings, deep thoughts and deep feelings. I hope some kids still have time like that. The ones I know seem to be on a treadmill of programming, rushing on without pause to the next event on their schedule, the soccer practice, the play date, the whatever. Sometimes I notice that teenagers in the family group are present in body, smiling, polite, apparently attentive, but absent. I hope they have found, they made themselves some spare time, and they are alone there, deep down there, thinking and feeling. The opposite of spare time is, I guess, occupied time. In my case, I still don't know what spare time is because all my time is occupied. It always has been and it is now. It's occupied by living. A band of brothers, a stream of sisters. Male solidarity appears to me to have been the prime shaper of most of the great ancient institutions of society. Government, army, priesthood, university, and the new one that may be devouring all the others, corporation. The existence and dominance of this hierarchic, organized, coherent, durable institution goes back so far and has been so nearly universal that it's mostly just called how things are, the world, the division of labor, history, God's will, etc. As for female solidarity, without it human society, I think, would not exist, but it remains all but invisible to man, history, and God. Female solidarity might better be called fluidity, a stream or river rather than a structure. The only institutions I am fairly sure it has played some part in shaping are the tribe and that very amorphous thing, the family. Wherever the male arrangement of society permits the fellowship of women on their own terms, it tends to be casual, unformulated, unhierarchical, to be ad hoc rather than fixed, flexible rather than rigid, and more collaborative than competitive. That it has mostly operated in the private rather than the public sphere is a function of the male control of society, the male definition and separation of public and private. It's hard to know if women's groups would ever gather into great centers because the relentless pressure from male institutions against such aggregation has prevented it. It might not happen anyhow. Instead of rising from the rigorous control of aggression in the pursuit of power, the energy of female solidarity comes from the wish and need for mutual aid and, often, the search for freedom from oppression. Elusiveness is the essence of fluidity. The nature of sisterhood is so utterly different from the power of brotherhood that it's hard to predict how it might change society. In any case, we've seen only a glimpse of what its effects might be. The great ancient male institutions have been increasingly infiltrated by women for the last 2 centuries, and this is a very great change. But when women manage to join the institutions that excluded them, they mostly end up being co-opted by them, serving male ends, enforcing male values. Which is why I have a problem with women in combat in the armed services, and why I watch the rise of women in the great universities and the corporations, even the government, with an anxious eye. Can women operate as women in a male institution without becoming imitation men? The horses upstairs. Children have to believe what adults are told. Willingness to believe is as necessary to a child as the suckling instinct is to a baby. A child has so much to learn in order to stay alive and in order to be human. Specifically, human knowledge is imparted largely through language. So first we have to learn language, then listen to what we are told and believe it. Testing the validity of information should always be permitted and is sometimes necessary, but may also be dangerous. The little one had better believe, without running any test, that the stove burner could burn even when it isn't red, that if you eat grandma's medicine you will be sick, that running out into the street is not a good idea. Anyhow, there's so much to be learned, it can't all be tasted. We really do have to believe what our elders tell us. We can perceive for ourselves, but have a very little instinctive knowledge in how to act on our perceptions and must be shown the basic patterns of how to arrange the world and how to find our way through it. Therefore, the incalculable value of true information and the unforgivable wrongness of lying to a child. An adult has the option of not believing. A child, particularly your own child, doesn't. In this sense, true to fact, insofar as we know what fact is, must come first. The children have to be able to trust what we've told. Their belief must be honored by our honesty. Readers' questions. Writing is a risky business. No guarantees. You have to take the chance. I'm happy to take it. I love taking it. So my stuff gets misread, misunderstood, misinterpreted. So what? If it's the real stuff, it will survive almost any abuse, other than being ignored, disappeared, not read. It doesn't have to be the way it is. There really is nothing to fear in fantasy unless you are afraid of the freedom of uncertainty. This is why it's hard for me to imagine that anyone who likes science can dislike fantasy. Both are based so profoundly on the admission of uncertainty, the welcoming acceptance of unanswered questions. Of course, the scientist seeks to ask how things are the way they are, not to imagine how they might be otherwise. But are the two operations opposed or related? We can't question reality directly, only by questioning our conventions, our belief, our orthodoxy, our construction of reality. All Galileo said, all Darwin said was, it doesn't have to be the way we thought it was. Clinging desperately to a metaphor, I want to ask how economists can continue to speak of growth as a positive economic goal. But why do we never question the system itself, so as to find ways to get around it or out of it? Capitalist growth, probably for at least a century and certainly from the turn of the millennium on, has been growth in the wrong sense. Not only endless but uncontrolled, random, growth as a tumor, growth as in cancer. At this rate, by the time we admit that cancer is not health, that we are sick, any cure must be so radical as almost certainly to require dictatorial rule, and to destroy more, physically and morally, than it can save. Nobody in any government seems able even to imagine alternatives, and people who talk about them get little attention. So, what is our new metaphor to be? It might be the difference between life and death, to find the right one. Thank you so much, take care, and see you next week.